Welcome in to another episode of Home Field Advantage. Hope everyone's having a great week wherever you may be across our great country or our great land. My name is Will Highland, recording on July 2nd, 2026, 2 days before the 250th anniversary of the United States of America. I hope all of our Canadian listeners had a great Canada Day yesterday. As an American, I am very excited about the 250th anniversary of the country. In fact, to close the episode, I'll read two excerpts of the Declaration of Independence. I love the 4th of July. If you know me personally, you know I'm a very patriotic guy. I love the United States. I love America. I love freedom, etc. And speaking of loving America and freedom and everything like that, the United States men's national team has a big win over Bosnia and Herzegovina. Oh my gosh. Yeah, pronunciation's not a strong suit for me, but United States beats Bosnia and Herzegovina last night to advance to the round of 16 in the FIFA World Cup. So we're going to talk about that to end the show. Right before we do the Declaration of Independence, we're going to talk about the big picture of the NHL off season that's underway. Hopefully, Diesel and I can do an episode of Odd Man Rush where we do more of a deep dive. And then we're also going to talk about the Jaylen Brown trade because, yeah, that happened as well. So we're going to lead off. I have a couple NHL thoughts. The first is, in my opinion, that there's going to be a lot of buzz about the Sharks and maybe Chicago, Florida, obviously earlier on with the Brady Tkachuk trade. Um, it it wasn't this week wasn't just about free agency and the draft. It was about reshaping of the league and a reshaping of how rosters are constructed. And what I mean by that is the NHL, in my opinion, is like the only sport that truly has a hard cap. Okay, the NFL, you can fudge it with guaranteed money and deferred this and, you know, cutting people by a certain date and all of this crap. MLB obviously has a luxury tax, which everyone knows is a joke. Basketball, similar thing, has sort of a cap, has max contract slots, all of that. But like the NHL is really the only major league in the United States that has, in my opinion, a hard finite cap. Sure, you can defer money, you can defer contracts, but everybody has a cap hit that goes against them that year, right? You can do what Vegas does and what Florida does and what the Bruins tried to do a few years ago, and you can put people on LTIR and bring them back for the playoffs, but they're closing all those loopholes. The NHL is a sport that attempts in its offseason to build parity, and they do so by having a hard cap. And for most of my life, the NHL salary construction has been very owner friendly, right? Like since the lockout, it's been owner friendly. You have a salary cap, you have strict free agency, RFA, you have that whole thing. You have a salary cap that was very small and that took a long time to grow because there was money put into an escrow account as a result of COVID and all these other things. So it's just now that the NHL is catching up to the other sports in that players are starting to have a big say in what goes on. And part of this is due to the fact that in the NHL, they give out no trade clauses you know, like a parade throws out candy on, the 4th of July. Like that's what they do. The GMs, because of all the leverage that players have in contract negotiations because of your hard cap, A player can just say, "Oh, well, you're not going to give me what I want because you're in cap constraints. I'm going to leave." And because of that, they want, I'll walk, and I'm only going to sign with you if this, and this happens. And because of that, you've they to counteract the power that the owners have and that the GMs have because of the hard salary cap, they've given out no movement clauses to make it harder for players to leave, or want to leave by giving them security, right? Because a player will say, "Look, like I can walk at the end of my contract unless I get the money I want, and if I get the money I want a no trade clause because I might be." I know that you guys have to leave money on the table because of this hard salary cap. So hopefully you understand where I'm coming from. Is that was the status quo in the NHL for most of my life. Last year or two, maybe 3 years, if you want to extend it back that far, maybe you can even go as far back to the Matthew Tkachuk trade in July of 22. Um, Players have begun to wield more power in the league, and this has happened because the salary cap has grown. Players have understood that they can threaten to walk and that somebody will give them a $12 million contract. Brady Tkachuk, yeah, he might have signed a long-term extension with Ottawa a couple of years ago, but he knows that if he hits free agency at age 32 or whatever it is, that somebody will give him a 7-year deal at 20 million a year by that point, and he can threaten to Ottawa, "I'm going to leave. I'm going to walk." It was even more of a case when Kachuk, his older brother Matthew, was entering his walk year with Calgary and said, "I'm not going to re-sign here. You guys need to trade me." And because he had a no trade clause, it shrinks the amount of teams that a particular player will accept a trade to. And that's a long way of getting to Dylan Larkin, Zach Werenski, Connor Hellebuck, Jason Robertson. All of these players who want to leave their current or may have or have been rumored to want to leave their current destinations are doing so because of the the cap situation, right? Like they are all choosing to leave because they know that teams are strapped with the hard cap and that they don't want these guys to walk for nothing, and they also have no movement clauses so they can dictate where they want to go. And they also know that despite the best attempts to make the league more balanced, there currently is a competitive balance problem in the NHL. There is. And this is not new. You unlike, and I'll give props to the NBA. They've had 9 years in a row with a new champion. The NHL has had a lot of teams in my adult life, even in my teenage years, go back to back or win 3 out of 4 or do whatever. Tampa did it. Pittsburgh did it. Florida did it. The Kings and Blackhawks did it. It's in my lifetime a pattern, and teams want to win. Players want to win cups, especially the American guys. The American guys want to win because they just experienced winning. Um, and no disrespect to Ottawa and Columbus, but you're not going to win a Stanley Cup there anytime soon. So this is the culture that's created. So this last week wasn't just about reshaping current rosters. It was about reshaping the league. And you can even see it in a team like San Jose. San Jose goes out, they get Trouba, Marchment. They're doing that because they know that right now Macklin Celebrini is cheap. Eventually, Macklin Celebrini is going to cost them 15, 16, 17, 18 million a year, something like that. And even if the salary cap is 112 million, which is going to, or 113 million, that's going to get up to in 2 years, that's still a big chunk of change. And they know that Macklin doesn't want to become like McDavid or Matthews, where they leave money on the table, stay in a particular place, and still don't have a Stanley Cup to show for it. So the Sharks are trying to get out ahead of all these issues that Calgary and that Ottawa have run into as a smaller market team and say, we're going to make sure our superstar feels very comfortable here and we're going to do what it takes, even if it means disrupting our current rebuild. If um, if that's what we need to do, and by going out and getting Truba and Marchman, and there was another player I'm forgetting. Diesel and I will get more into it when we do our pod, but like that is the shape of the league. We're circling the wagons here on certain markets and players. Florida, I heard a guy on NHL Network Radio, I think it was Bruce Boudreau, say yesterday. I hope I'm not misattributing. He said there's no super teams in the NHL because of the hard cap. I partially agree with him, but you look at what Florida has assembled. Um, that's pretty close to a super team. You look at the way that Anaheim and LA, who was a big spender yesterday, who knows how that's going to work for them. You look at what they're doing. Look at what Dallas has tried to do. There's a lot of movement around certain markets. Carolina, um, I mean, look at Washington, right? Like Washington is going balls to the wall, right? Tampa is going balls to the wall. Everybody is trying to stay as competitive as possible because because in a league where the players dictate movement, they want to become a destination. I had said it for years that the Boston Bruins were a destination. And don't get me wrong, I liked what the Bruins did, acquiring JJ Peterka, acquiring William Borgen, acquiring or getting Connor Clifton back, um, dealing off Corpusalo. Like I liked their moves. I think they're a slightly better team on paper heading into next year than they were last year, and they made the playoffs last year. I think the Bruins are ahead of schedule. I think Hagens and Letourneau are great, but the Bruins right now aren't a destination if you're somebody like Dylan Larkin or Zach Werenski or Connor Hellebuyck. Well, obviously not with Hellebuyck, um, or anybody or Jason Robertson. Like they're just not a destination right now. It doesn't mean they're closer than some other teams in the league. I think there's probably 10 or 11 teams in the league that nobody wants to get traded to. Is that Columbus? Is that the New Jersey Devils? You know, is it St. Louis? I don't know. Like, there's a few teams that I'm not sure people want to get traded to. Is Calgary Flames, the Winnipeg Jets, etc. But there's less and less of those teams when Buffalo makes the run that they did last year. Montreal, same thing. There's less and less of those teams. And so, in some ways, the league is balancing itself out, but you still have certain teams making big splashes, and they're doing it because they have to maximize the window they've got. And I just think it's really fascinating. So we'll dive into more of it with Diesel next time we do Odd Man Rush, and we'll get into some of the specific moves. But I just think a big picture for the league, it's a very different league, right? And I actually think it's good. I think the NHL being relevant year round in the news cycle and having an off season that just happens in a week and a half, 2 weeks, is exciting because now we're 2 months away from training camp. Might feel like a long time, but you have a pretty good picture of what the league looks like. And so I think that's pretty beneficial for hockey fans in a time when there's so much else going on in the sports world. And we've been talking about teams that have taken different directions and rallying around their stars and maximizing windows. It appears that after last night, the Boston Celtics era of the Jays is well, first of all, it doesn't appear it is over. However, it appears that a new era in Boston has officially begun, and that era is that Jason Tatum is the focal point of this team, um, and that the Celtics have been built around Tatum and Tatum alone. For much of my adult life, they drafted Tatum. I think I was 19 or 20. I might have been 18. I forget. 2017 draft. I was, yeah. Okay. I'm not going to date myself. But from the last almost decade, the Celtics were built around Tatum and Brown, Tatum and Brown, Brown and Tatum, Brown and Tatum, Brown and Tatum. And, my Celtics fans' friends are going to, hate this when I say this, but and they might disagree with me. Look, and look, just a disclosure, like I do root for the Celtics, but I'm not a basketball fan, like generally. But by trading him, they have sort of just given up on that dream of those guys being a dynastic duo or a big three type. Or, if you add in whoever they had over the years, whether it was Smart or Derek White or anyone else, like they just gave up on that in the last year or so. And I'm not quite sure why. It wasn't that long ago, maybe 2 years ago, they were willing to make Jaylen Brown at the time the highest paid player in league history. And now they want to deal him 2 years, 3 years later. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me because I don't think, like, if it was financial, then sure. I mean, there's all kinds of financial stipulations in the NBA that I don't fully understand. But I don't think Celtics fans are gonna like me to say this, but was the era of the Jays a failure? Like you had the championship in 2024, and that was an incredible run. Probably one of the most dominant postseason runs I've seen in my life. I think they went 16-2. The losses they had weren't really even big losses. And you don't even remember those games because they were just so dominant. They made the quick work of the Mavericks and Kyrie Irving on home court. It just it wasn't your typical run though. Like in term not that year, but in terms of the whole thing. Like it felt like they were constantly looking to next year, to next year, to next year. Even if you go way back to when Kyrie was still around, it was, and Gordon Hayward was here, it was, oh, well, next year we're going to be this, and then next year we're going to be that, and then next year, next year, next year. And then you finally get to that point and you win in 2024, and then you have that awful situation where Tatum was hurt last postseason, but let's be honest, they weren't going to win that series anyway. Um, and and then it just sort of blew up from there. This year there was seemed to be some weird tension even when Tatum was on his way back and I just think like the whole era was a little bit of a failure. Like it felt like it was a balloon that just a hot air balloon that never got off the ground. Like you won your title, which again I just went through a few minutes ago about how the NBA in the 2020s has been handing out titles like candy. I mean, the Knicks just won for crying out loud. Last year, Oklahoma City won. You had Toronto win. You had Denver win. I mean, it wasn't, and it was a great title run, but it was 1 year out of how many years? 2019, 2020, 2021, 22. I mean, we're talking 7, 8, 9 years of the Jays, and probably 4 or 5 of them in their prime here. And you get one title. And like if you would ask Celtics fans 2 years ago, they were sort of pulling the 2010 LeBron playbook. Hey, we might win 3 or 4. They've got one, and this is a guy Jaylen Brown who never requested a trade. He was sort of disgruntled. He's kind of always disgruntled as a guy. That's just kind of who he is. Like he's bothered about something all the time, and wants to self-motivate himself, thinks that people don't believe in him or whatever. That's fine. That's good. It's good to have ambition, even if it's self-propelled. But I look at this whole thing and I'm like, as a quasi outsider, I wonder like, it, what is Brad Stevens doing? Like you do like first of all they tried to trade him for Giannis, the Greek freak, and didn't work. So now the whole world knows you're trying to trade Jaylen Brown. By the way, everybody kind of knew as recently as maybe, or as far back as maybe February, March, that things were starting to rumble around, especially around the time Tatum came back. And I'm left to wonder, like, w- what is what was the point of that? It's like walking into a casino and sitting at the poker table and telling everybody, "Hey, I'm only gonna bet this much, or I'm never gonna go all in." Well, they'll look at you and say, "Okay, well, I know how to gamble with you then. I know how to game with you." That's kind of what the Celtics did, and in return, in much of the NBA world, the people that follow the sport more closely than I do, they're all saying that the Celtics didn't get enough. Two second round picks, two first round picks, and Paul George. Now, look, Paul George would have been a great asset to this team like 9 years ago at the beginning of this run. Um, but like, what is this Paul George's 15th team? I mean, my goodness, I lost track of how many teams he's been on at this point. So, like, what are we? And that's basically just to match the money so that Philadelphia can pay him. We can pay Brown. Um, it just it doesn't in the two first round picks. Like, look, it's entirely possible that this team could implode. And by that this team I mean Philadelphia, the 76ers. They could implode, and those two first round picks, could become lottery picks, and you might be able to build, the next team the same way you did 10 years ago with, Marcus Smart and Terry Rozier and when he wasn't gambling, speaking of casinos. And and then you eventually got Tatum and Brown. That sounds like a great idea. Problem is they've got the guy still in his prime who's not even 30. What are you doing? If you had traded him and got Giannis in here, yeah, sure, Giannis is a little bit older, but he's not older than Paul George. Like, and I think the Celtics are still going to sleepwalk their way to a top three seed in the East next year. But it's the spirit of it. And to me, it just signals that the whole, kind of like the Big Three era, if I'm being completely honest, was a little bit of a failure. You look at all these teams that won multiple titles. The Heat won multiple titles. Um, right? They did, right? I'm not missing. Yeah, 2012 and 2013. Um, the Warriors certainly did. The Cavaliers sort of not really. And all those. Oh no, they did. No, no. LeBron was LeBron won in 16 with them, but not in 17 or 18, I believe. Yeah. Yeah, okay. But like still, the big three era with Pierce, Garnett, and Allen, I mean, you got one title and you lost in 2010 when you should have won. And you and then you blew that up, and sure that helped with those draft picks that you traded to Brooklyn when you traded Garnett and Pierce. Certainly helped set this run up. But again, you're talking about two generational groups of talent, and you have two titles in how many years? 18 years? In a league where, sure, there's been some parity lately, but teams have gone on and had multiple championship runs, and that looked like the direction the Celtics were going in. And it just seemed like a little bit of a panic move. Like, the, it's just, it's crazy. Like, I'm not as worked up about it as some Celtics fans. Like I saw some people that were like on Twitter that were extremely upset. Um, but I I can't I can't get over the fact that you had the window, and sure, Jason Tatum are sort of yin and yang. Right, one guy, Tatum, is very quiet, doesn't like being in the spotlight, but performs. He's kind of like your Tim Duncan. And then you've got, Jaylen Brown, which is a little, if you're comparing him to an NBA superstar just on persona, like he's a little bit more like like an Allen Iverson um, even a LeBron, somebody who like kind of likes being in front of the camera, says they don't, but likes it. likes to, but those guys, they gelled. Now, did they gel good enough to, well enough to win more than one championship? No, but you had these guys, and unless you had the perfect trade, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Um, and it just sort of signals that they were ready for the era to be over, and in my opinion, that means it was a little bit of a failure. It's, I guess, my overall thesis. Like, if you were willing to give up on the J era, less than 48 or less than 24 months removed from a championship, then, I don't know what to tell you. Like, the Celtics probably should have gone farther in this postseason, right? They blew a 3-1 lead, in the playoffs. And I honestly forget who they blew the lead to. Was it Philly? No. Yeah. No, it wasn't. Oh my God. My basketball friends are yelling at me right now. No chance. No. Was it? It wasn't the Knicks. Wasn't the Cavs. Was it Philly? I am sorry. I gotta look this up. It's bugging me. Who did the Celtics? I know this is not lo great content. Okay, they lost to the Knicks last year. I remember that. That was a series that Tatum got hurt, but they were still going to lose it anyway. Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. They lose to the Sixers. Okay, that makes this even stupider. You trade your second best player to the team that eliminated you. This is what doesn't make sense. Like, they're giving up on the run. Why? Why? It's because the run was a failure. That's the only other reason. That's my thesis. It has to be. It's crazy. It's crazy. All right. Speaking of crazy, United States wins last night, but they win in despite having 10 men for the final 30 minutes after the worst red card I have seen since my days watching soccer commenced like 12 years ago. I started watching soccer 2014 World Cup. Um then I got into the Premier League probably like 2018, 19, 20, that era when Pochettino was managing Tottenham Hotspur. That's how I ended up becoming a Spurs fan. But like I haven't watched soccer my whole life, but I've watched enough of it. And I've seen these guys dive around and roll around. And I like the sport. I know a lot of Americans who like American football or baseball or basketball, hockey, whatever. Like have this like programmed thing to like, think like soccer is lame. I actually like soccer. Like I think soccer is I wish it was more popular. I think some of this stuff makes it less popular in America because we're just like we look at that and we're like, what are we doing? What is that for? What that is so soft. Like, and we just have like this built up anger over it. We also, as Americans, just like being different. However, this World Cup has been awesome. You've seen all these people from around the world that talk about how the news portrays America as horrible, but they come here and they love it and they love the people, etc. This is all great stuff. Um, but I lost my train of thought there. This red card, okay, is one of the reasons why like some Americans are just gonna be like, wait, so our guy accidentally hit a guy in the back of his ankle and that guy rolled around on the ground for 20 minutes and because of that he can't play in the next game in a elimination game against Belgium, the same team that eliminated the United States in 2014. That's crazy. You know what I'm saying? Like that's wild. So, I digress. The United States has now lost because of this stupid red card. Their second best player, I'm gonna butcher his name, Balogun, I want to say. Like, I forget who he plays for. I think, did he not have the first goal yesterday? I'm again not a big soccer guy. I was watching it on mute because all of these games are late at night, and they happen on the West Coast. I have to watch them on mute so I can at least try and get some sleep when it's 90 degrees outside. Um, I I am so I'm not an expert on the situation. I do know that I watched the majority of the game and they played well, even with 10 men. Again, Pochettino, my man, Marco, let's get him on a fast track to citizenship right now. Um, have him apply. Let's get on it. We got to get him on a fast track. At least get him in the folder, get the folder down to Foggy Bottom, and let's get Pochettino his American citizenship. I love that man. He's walking around with his unbuttoned shirt. He did have a t-shirt on underneath, singing Wonderwall, not Wonderwall, that's England's song. Sorry, singing Freebird, doing fist bumps in the air, man, tactically managing circles around all these other teams. Ironically, one of the reasons they lost to Turkey in the meaningless game is because they were resting guys to not get a red card, and then their like second best player gets a red card. Lame, but it's exciting nonetheless because despite the best attempts to weaken the United States in the last 30 minutes on home soil in San Francisco, we won 2-0, and we are moving on to play Belgium. And I call me crazy, but like I actually do think there's momentum building around this team. Like from not just casuals like me, but from like generally people that don't like sports. Like I think there's been so much World Cup penetration in the market that like people are starting to come around. And that was the hope of this World Cup. I think leading up to this World Cup, a lot of the soccer guys, the people that you're gonna find at the bar with their scarves on, lovely people. Lovely people, let me tell you. These guys were sort of telling us for the last 3 to 4 years that like, we're gonna be right there. We're gonna be right there. This is it. This is the time. This is the time. Like there's been some tactical errors on behalf of like the MLS, getting Messi here and then putting all their games on Apple TV. There's been um some misses on superstar marketing. Like I think they've leaned a little bit too much into Pulisic. Like I like Christian Pulisic, but does he really need to be on a McDonald's cup? Like I think there's a little bit of that we're like kind of pushing the envelope on. But the good news is like these guys are kind of right. Like there's some momentum clearly on the grassroots level. Some of these watch parties I've seen, the Euros tried to tell us that there wasn't going to be a lot of excitement because Americans don't like soccer. Well, give Americans something to party around and wear red, white, and blue about, and they'll do it. And I think that's sort of come to be true. See some of these stadium parking lots. It kind of looks like when the Maple Leafs get together outside of Maple Leaf Square, except we actually win. Like there's a lot of that going on, and that's good. That's good. So there's true momentum in that win yesterday over Belgium, heading into the holiday weekend, heading into the big matchup. Sorry, not against Belgium, against Bosnia, heading into the holiday weekend, leading up to Monday's game against Belgium. That's going to be big. And I do think there's some overreaction to how good they've been. Like, sure, they beat Paraguay, and Paraguay ended up beating Germany, and then they just blew the doors off Australia. And then they, like, tactically, they were so much better than Australia that game. And then, they sort of laid the egg against Turkey, but it didn't matter, and they were resting guys. And then last night, sure, another clean sheet against Belgium. Sorry, I keep saying that. Bosnia. Now, I think they're good. I think they kind of got past the Pulisic injury scare, and um, now they have to go and play Belgium, and they're going to do so without Balogun, and I believe He scored against Australia as well, and I think they are poised to compete for win. This isn't like last time when they went to go play the Netherlands and everyone was kind of like, yeah, that was a cute effort, but I don't really think we're gonna get there. Um, I think they've taken the next step. Um, and I think for the first time in my life, the U.S. men's national team is a um, must-see television if you're a sports fan rather than a niche. I think even the World Cup in 2022, because it was happening at the same time as football, American football, was a little bit of a niche sport. I think in 2014 it certainly was. And then in 2018 we weren't even at the World Cup. So I think this is the time when like sure, those guys that, wear the scarves and the kits and are lovely people, they're gonna pay attention to the men's national team, when they're playing in CONCACAF for the global whatevers. This is mainstream sports now. Like United States in the round of 16 of the World Cup on home soil, if they are to win Monday and go play in the round of eight, I'm gonna pull up my bracket here. Um, World Cup bracket. Thank you. I did not have it up. They're gonna play Belgium, and then they're gonna play one of the following four teams if they were to beat Belgium: Portugal, Croatia, Spain, or Austria. If they play Spain or Portugal on a Friday night, next Friday the 10th, like that's major TV in the round of eight of the FIFA World Cup. Like I'm not saying it will get close to an NFL playoff game, but it might get close to a World Series game, if not more. Like that would be huge TV. And if somehow they get to the semifinals, which that's a huge ask, being Portugal or Spain would be a huge ask. If they somehow get to the semifinals, which would be the Wednesday after, and they'd end up with, help me out here, they'd end up with somebody like Brazil, England, you know, uh, Argentina would probably who they'd end up with. That would be insane. So like, we're still a ways away. We're still a ways away from this, but I think that as a country, like we've kind of accomplished what we've wanted to out of this World Cup. Like Belgium's dangerous. Um, Pulisic has lived up to the hype in terms of being the face of the team and the leader, but you've also got Weah and McKennie, and you had Balogun and like these guys. It's a likable team. It's a likable group. Pochettino is amazing. And so it sort of entered the mainstream, and that's good news. That's what we wanted. And so for that reason, I think US soccer fans should be happy. And I think despite the red card, I'm not going to let it ruin the spirits of the holiday weekend. Because it's been super fun to see everybody coalesce around the team. I think that's been fun, and I think the soccer guys were right when they told us that this was a pivotal year for that. All right, speaking of pivotal years, 1776, pivotal year, 250 years ago today. They were probably taking a day off after drafting the Declaration of Independence and not signing it yet. Thomas Jefferson, probably sat back and, read a book or something and tried not to sweat himself to death, contract the disease or something. Um, Great times. I mean, fantastic times to be alive. Unless you were in New York City and a British naval fleet was arriving, a lot of people forget that that was going on at the same time as the Continental Congress was gathered in Philadelphia. Oh, that's weird. 1776. That's 76 years gathering in Philadelphia. I'm just gonna move on from that one. All right. I'm not gonna make a joke. Celtics fans, I love them too much. All right. So while this was all going on in the course of these human events, they decided to publish the Declaration of Independence. So in honor, I'm going to end the show by by reading two excerpts from the Declaration of Independence, the first paragraph and the last one. All right. From the words of Thomas Jefferson and the Continental Congress from July 4th, 1776, which I believe was drafted before I begin on July 2nd. So 250 years ago today, it was written. They signed it 2 days later, I believe. And John Adams thought they were going to celebrate today. Turns out they celebrated July 4th. Nonetheless, we're celebrating all weekend here, home field advantage. And to kick it all off, this is what was written. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with one another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, or usurpations, excuse me, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, their duty, to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their freedom, security. And then Jefferson goes on to list a bunch of reasons why King George III had harmed his own people, his own British subjects. So this is a very revolutionary idea, no pun intended. Like they were saying that we don't get our rights from the king, we get them from a creator, and they're natural rights. They are endowed by us. And not only that, we have a king who is abusing these rights, and because of that, we have to form a new government. He closes by saying, "We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America and General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is ought to be totally dissolved, and that as a free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor." So Jefferson closes the Declaration of Independence by saying that, first of all, we are declaring independence not just as a group of 53 men or 55 men, whatever it is, but we're doing it on behalf of people of the colonies, and we are severing our connection with the British Crown, and we are doing so that we may be able to, as a nation, be self-governed autonomously with our own powers to do business, to contract alliances, etc. This is a very radical idea, even more radical than the statement, all men are created equal, I would say, is because there were some Enlightenment thinkers that believed that, but a radical statement to say we are forming a new country because we said so. Very radical thing to do. And we're not doing it on behalf of a military, on behalf of a general. We're doing it on behalf of on people, on common people. And they understood the risk of doing this. That's why they pledged, and they believed it was a providence to do this. They pledged to each other their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. It's an incredible document, foundation of our Constitution, foundation of our country. That's what we celebrate on Friday or Saturday. And so, as much as I loved what Harry Kane did the other day for England, coming back, helping them win and beat Congo with those two incredible goals, I'm because of what these guys did, I'm not cheering for England in the World Cup. I'm cheering for the United States. So I'm going to leave us on that. Hope you all have a great 4th of July. Hope you have a great weekend. We'll be back with Diesel to talk some hockey next week. Looking forward to it. In the meantime, stay cool. As I said, be safe. Enjoy your holiday weekend. This has been a great re-entry episode of Home Field Advantage. I'm Will Highland. Happy Independence Day.